successful tourist destination. And I think while most of you know it as a tourist destination, I think what is less known about the destination is that its success is the product of a highly functional public-private partnership for the last 15 years. Since 2011, the waterfront has been 50% owned by Growthpoint, the largest property investment company in South Africa, but importantly owned by the Government Employees Pension Fund as represented by the Public Investment Corporation. And over the next 10 minutes or so, what I'd like to do is to give you some insight into what I believe are the key principles behind the success of this public-private partnership. My hope is to illustrate that this is not just a Cape Town story, but this is a replicable tourism investment model that we can deliver solid investment yields, significant job opportunities, and an authentic world-leading African tourism experience. But first, just a little bit of the history. So the Port of Cape Town was established here in common with many port cities because it was the most sheltered area for sailing ships. If you roll forward to 1980s, all of these ports became redundant and derelict because containerization had overtaken them. So in 1988, the City of Cape Town and Transnet Port formed a company called the V&A Waterfront with the purpose of redeveloping this derelict land. And in 2007, the entity was sold for $1 billion to Dubai World and London Regional. I joined in 2008, and most of you will remember that was when the financial crisis hit. So there was very little investment took place after that. We did host the 2010 Soccer World Cup, which was an incredible experience. And then in 2011, the waterfront was sold to the current owners, the PIC and Growthpoint. And it was from this point that the most significant growth and investment has taken place. Today, the waterfront is a mixed-use neighborhood. It incorporates retail shops, restaurants, commercial office, hotel, residential accommodation, over 100 attractions and event spaces, and it now receives over 25 million visits a year. It's responsible for 30,000 people working in the waterfront, and the waterfront is responsible for creating 83,000 jobs. It is the single biggest concentration of economic activity within the province, and importantly, it's the home to almost 450 SMMEs. So I've identified 8 principles that I want to talk to you about. First one is, and I feel they're all relevant to the kind of conversations and topics that we've been listening about. The first one is that it's supported by long-term funding. Many projects of this nature can find initial funding, but they struggle to find continuity of the funding. And I think one of the critical things here is that the land ownership was preserved. And what that means is that as you develop the precinct, that the capital appreciation means that that will support the future funding. So the owners have to look at this as a long-term project, and they have to look at it as a capital appreciation and income yield project. And I think that's a critical success in this project. Excuse me a sec. The second principle, is that the development is for retention and not investment yield. I think too often what we see, and development is of that nature, it's development and then flips on. The secret of success here has been that the development has been consciously done with a view to long-term ownership and hold within long-term holders, such as pension funds, such as the Growthpoint investment. Often what you see in projects of mixed-use developments of this nature is that people sell off the crown jewels, and then the whole project loses its emphasis and loses its focus. So retention of the development, which is counterintuitive to most development. Third one is that we operate a shared value leadership modality. And I think we often, when we're talking investment, we're talking success, private partnership, one of the most critical things is the leadership. And what we've evolved and developed here is this thing called a shared value ecosystem, which is a leadership culture within the organization. And when it's working at its best, it leverages the advantage of a public-private partnership. It facilitates innovation while, in a sense, curbing the excesses of the public and the private. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail about that and how, when it's working, it curbs the excesses of the public and the private. So I'll pick up 2 of these points, and this is the shared value ecosystem leadership modality I'll pick up a bit later. Fourth is this JV is a 50-50. And it's actually been a very effective mechanism over the last 15 years, to the point we've virtually never had to pick up the legal document that was put in place. And I think in this particular instance, the fact that neither party have the control or the undue influence has meant that we've created a stable leadership team who've been able to get on and develop the project. And I think it's well worth considering that 50-50 non-leading in public or leading in private has resulted in that strong leadership team. 8th principle is proactive management and curation. I think it's commonly called placemaking. But it is an investment in property, but it's actually about the spaces between the buildings that's more important. It's about the events and the activities that you curate. So it's not just about the building and the investment. It's actually more importantly about the spaces and the activities that you curate between the buildings. 6th one is an authentic and clear and primary focus on locals. It is a tourism-driven project, but it is the focus on locals. They authenticate the investment for the tourists, and people are more and more seeking these authentic tourist experiences. They're not seeking tourist traps. So primarily, we look at how does this impact the locals. 55% of the visits to the precinct are locals, and 45% are tourists. The 7th principle is a focus on specific ecosystems, and I'm going to talk to this a bit more. It's one of the 2 things I will talk to. But the precinct needs an identity, and it needs a purpose, and it needs to have something that differentiates it. And what we look at, and every precinct will be different, but we're looking at what are the ecosystems that are going to drive the economic growth and the job creation. And we look at food, retail, art, craft and design, ocean economy, and sustainability. And I'll unpack that in more detail. But I think that focus is what gives rise to the differentiation, gives rise to the kind of magic and the realism about the investment. Final one, which is particularly important in public-private partnerships, is a clear understanding of the sphere and boundary of influence and the locus of control. And what I mean by that is, what do? We provide a platform to showcase the best of South Africa. We provide a marketplace opportunity, and we provide space and property. A major challenge facing public-private partnerships is that people look to these partnerships to resolve all the public sector goals. And while that's laudable, often what happens if you're dragged into all of the public sector goals, it suffocates and distracts the organization and takes away the sustainability from it. So in a sense, by being dragged in all these different directions, it's self-defeating. So I'm going to pick up 2 specific principles that I've been talking to. First one is this shared value leadership modality. Simply put, this is the culture that you create within the organization. And I think it's a key differentiator in public-private partnerships. While the primary focus is commercial gain and sustainability and yield for the investors, every project we look at, everything we do, we look at through the lenses of opportunity. What is the job-creating opportunity within the project? Inclusivity, how does the project enhance the opportunity for previously disadvantaged groups? And finally, sustainability. And I think what I'll show and hopefully demonstrate is that if you are a purpose-driven organization as opposed to a purely shareholder-driven organization or a government entity, if you are purpose-driven, that unlocks people to create and innovate, because they're not just creating and innovating for shareholder value. They're creating for the opportunity you're creating. They're innovating for sustainability, and they're innovating for inclusivity. And I'll talk to you about how that innovation has come through. And I would argue that you attract the best people. I think we often talk about public sector and private sector leading. The secret within the waterfront is that we attract the best people, people who are purpose-driven, and they come from the public sector and they come from the private sector. If you create that and allow them the freedom to innovate, that's where the ideas and the innovation comes from. So you create an environment that allows inclusive growth, and you allow people, because these innovations and ideas are all going to come from the people, so you create that environment for them to come up with these ideas. You're freeing the management from the excesses and evils of investment purely for short-term financial gain, and also there's the strictures of a public sector. So, it is down to the leadership and the people. There's a lovely expression, if you're in an organization where purpose is at the heart, your purpose is not what you do. It's the thing that happens in others when you do what you do. And if you can create that environment with public sector, private sector, that's what leads to innovation and creativity. And that, as one of the earlier speakers said, that's what supports the financial success and the continuity of it. So I'm going to look to the ecosystems that we focus on. These are the specific ones that we've come up with. I think this model is replicable, but you need to identify what are the areas of focus or ecosystems that you concentrate on based on what's going to create jobs and what's going to lead you to growth. So I'll go in and look at them, and I'll give you examples of the innovation and creativity that's come in each one. So food markets are incredibly important for inclusive. They allow tourists to interact with locals. Waterfront has the Oz Farm Market. Now, it's one of the top 10 farmers markets in the world, which is insane. I mean, how many tens of thousands of farmers markets are there in the world? So here in the tip of Africa, to have one of the top 10, and that comes from fostering a climate, a leadership modality that allows that innovation and creativity. Other project we've got, it's the only one in Africa, is a food incubator. So this incubator is recognizing there's a lot of entrepreneurs that have an idea and a concept, but the gap that needs to be bridged between them taking that concept and idea into a sustainable business needs to be filled. So as an organization, we are profit-led, but as an organization, we identify in collaboration with our tenants that we need to foster the ecosystem. So we created this food incubator. Food incubator is an enormous shared kitchen, and we run a cohort program to train and develop the people with the ideas. We allow them to set up and trade for 6 months, and then ultimately they open up their bricks and mortar. Retail marketplace, we provide over 750 retail marketplace opportunities, and that ranges from the kind of international luxury outlet right down to the small business market trader. But the critical thing here is that we focus on the small to medium-sized businesses, the 450. We give them a huge amount of collaboration, assistance, and training, and we give them this pipeline where they can grow and develop their businesses. Art, craft, and design. There is an extraordinary art, craft, and design talent within South Africa. So again, looking at that ecosystem and what does that ecosystem need? And we identified the need that it needed a focal point, it needed a single location, and we created Africa's largest museum of contemporary art in the Zeitz Mocha. In addition to that, we've created, and we very, very proactively curate the Watershed, which is Africa's premier art and craft market, 120 small businesses, 365 brands, called the Watershed. In terms of ocean economy, we identified the need within the ocean economy for the opportunity of cruise terminals. So we've created the cruise terminal something like 7 years ago. For the last 3 years, it's been voted Africa's best cruise terminal. In fact, the first cruise liner is here, although behind you, you will see the first cruise liner of the season. Every year, the season gets a little bit shorter. But it's these kind of unconventional and innovative ideas that comes from focusing on these ecosystems. The aquarium is long established. It's one of the finest aquariums in the world. It receives some 500,000 visitors a year. Yeah, it's got almost 3,000 marine creatures. But the sort of passion and the innovation that happens there is at the point where they create the marine biology curriculum for the country. Sustainability is the final ecosystem that we focus on. We have the largest concentration of sustainable buildings, something like 16 in one area. At the other end of the extreme, we've innovated and created a building that is built out of 90% sustainable products. So I think that gives you an idea of how you bring public-private together. You create this environment, you focus on these ecosystems, and you actually allow people to innovate and create, you collaborate, and you can produce these kind of very differentiated products, which a conventional private sector, I would argue, would probably never do in there. It's very much about a long-term approach and freeing people to do the good purpose work that they want to do. So looking to the future, there's a great American saying which is in mixed-use neighborhoods that if you ever think you're finished, you're done. So looking to the next 15, 25 years, yesterday the Minister unveiled our next 15 to 20 year project, which is the Granger Bay project, a plan of about 20 billion investment. Will bring an additional 15,000 jobs to the site, create an additional almost 50,000 nationally, and it's going to be residential-led and housing for some 6,000 people. Thank you. So just briefly, critically, what's interesting about this project, two particularly differentiating parts of it. So here we're at the tip of Africa. You've got a very hostile coastline. You need coastal protection. You have 7-meter waves coming in. So we have to put that coastal protection in place. But these hostile weather conditions are only 5% of the time. So most of the time Cape Town is like this, it's benign. So what we've done is we've got designers and we've got the coastal protection people together. And for the first time, we think ever, we've designed the coastal protection with public amenity and accessibility in mind. So it'll have rock pools, swimming pools, paddling pools. So for 95% of the time, it's a piece of public amenity and it allows access to the water. And for the other 5% of time, it's closed off as a protection. That's the first part. The second part of it is that we're creating a bay. It's going to be a center of marine ecology because in sustainability, I think we're aware of the dangers of the built and the unbuilt environment, but the next frontier in sustainability, and I'm meaning sustainability of the planet, is ocean sustainability. And the fact that 60% of the oxygen comes from the ocean, we are unaware of just how much damage is happening there. So the idea here is to create a model of ocean ecology to allow people to prototype and experiment their ideas. So we've taken a baseline on this, and then we'll cluster in organizations who want to trial projects, artificial reefs, and we'll foster that kind of community in there. And importantly, it will be accessible to the 30 million visitors who come to the waterfront, because most of what's happening out in the ocean is inaccessible. So it's kind of looking further forward and creating something unique and special within the neighborhood. So in closing, I think that this is a replicable model for public-private partnership. Right at the heart are financial considerations, but right at the heart actually is creating an environment where you've got people who are purpose-driven and they can both produce the sort of investment yields and returns and then have the freedom to innovate and create. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Brilliant. David, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to temporarily take your seat. Does anyone else have job envy at the moment, if you look at all that David has to play with on a daily basis? Brilliant. As we said, we have these spotlights taking place. You've seen one of the project spotlights and what David has just shared. We're going to share with you another video. This coming from SandParks on one of the opportunities that exists in terms of investment in South Africa. Video, please. Brilliant. Thank you very much. May I please ask the CEO of SandParks, Ms. Habilo Sello, to stand up? She's in the room. Excellent. So, Madam is the one you want to speak to when it comes to seeing how you can make this beautiful project your own. So now we're going to move into our next panel discussion. I must say I'm really looking forward to this. We are going to include Q&A in it, so please do ask any questions you might want. And we have 4 great speakers that are going to be coming up, so we're going to be losing one of those chairs, so sadly we lost one of them. Now the importance about this panel is getting a sense of, and building on what David spoke about, how do you really make these PPPs work? Because PPPs can be a pain. That's just the reality of it. Unless you're in a situation where you have someone like a David, where again, relationships matter, people trust. So I'm going to ask David to please join me back on the stage, and also ask that we welcome to the stage Jerry Mabena, the CEO of Motsamaya Tourism Group. Jerry is also the chairman of Tourism Business Council of South Africa, so we're delighted to have the private sector side coming on. And he hates when I do this, but he's also South Africa's version of Denzel Washington. So we also have joining us as well the lovely CEO of SandParks, Habilo Sello, who just stood up a moment ago. Thank you, madam, for joining us. And we have joining us from Cape Nature, the Tourism Development and Public-Private Partnerships, Wilfred Williams. Please join us on stage. Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. So we're going to spend the next about 45 minutes just having a little bit of a conversation about how do we really make these conversations work? How do we honestly make them work? Everyone has your microphones? Brilliant. Excellent. So, to begin with, I think what's really important here, and the nice thing about a session like this, is that we can get personal. That's the nature of investment. You're investing, oh, someone's nervous. That's the nature of relationships. It's when you're working with people that you can trust, that you can call in the middle of the night when there's an emergency. Now, I have to tell a small story. One of the reasons why I'm such a fan of David Green is something that mortified. Actually, I've done 2 of these in my life with you. We met in 2008. when the V&A Waterfront, as he explained, was going through a very tricky, unstable time. And I think my first words to you when we met on the cruise tourism strategy workshop, else not in Cape Town, was when you said, oh, my name is David Green, and I'm with the V&A Waterfront. Now, everyone had heard about this man named David Green showing up. And I think my first words to you were, oh, so you're the Messiah, because it was David was going to fix everything. And he's taken on his job with such personal conviction and joy, as you can see from what he's done. And for David, it's the epitome of God is in the detail. It's those little things that matter. And I think David is an absolute star, especially at Christmas time. Because when I lived here, I was walking towards the V&A, and for those that have been to the V&A, you know that the flagpole becomes a magnificent Christmas tree every year. Absolutely glorious. And I was walking to the V&A Waterfront, and it's Christmas, and all the lights are going up, and all the decorations are up, and I look at the Christmas tree, and I felt like, does everyone know how the Grinch stole Christmas? And little Betty Lou Who gets really upset because the Grinch is stealing all the prizes. I felt like little Betty Lou Who, because I look at the tree, and it's beautiful, but there was no star. And I wrote an email to David, and I just said, your tree is beautiful, but you can't make a wish on a tree that doesn't have a star. Now, again, my partner was just, you did what to the CEO of the Waterfront? I received an email back, and he explained that basically one of the reasons why there wasn't a star is because of with Cape winds, if a star was hit by a wind stream in Cape Town, that star was going to take someone's head off. It would just turn it. And I was like, okay, I accept that, but you still can't wish on the Christmas tree. I then get photographs of his engineer and an email from Chantel Cole, another one, dear colleague and friend who's now not at the Waterfront anymore, of photographs of all these different stars that you investigated around the world. And then I get this picture of a star going up on the tree. And he had created this magnificent star that the wind would go through. And every single year, literally every year, he sends me a photograph of the new Christmas tree of the V&A Waterfront.
With the star.
With the star. Which means every year my partner's like, you are doing what to distract the attention of, and it was a baby bird last time that you helped me rescue. So, but the point is, that's what partnership is about. These infrastructure projects don't matter if they don't have a heartbeat in them. They don't matter. And that's why, to me, what is so fundamentally important, and I want to explore with all of you in terms of public-private partnership, it's the third P, which is people partnership. Because these projects don't work. No one wants a job. They want dignity. They want respect. They want participation. They want pride. And that's where I'm going to start with you, Denzel. And ask you, please, firstly, can you explain the name of your company?
Oh, gosh. Good afternoon, everyone. Our company is called Motsamai Tourism because we were birthed out of a company called Tebe. And that particular company was actually founded by, among others, Nelson Mandela. And when we shifted from Tebe into the new phase of our business, which is we then wanted to create that link with the legacy of Nelson Mandela, and hence the name Motsamai, which is the name that he went by when he was on the run away from the police, and that's the name that was on his passport when he was arrested in Howick. And the beauty of the name also is that it's also a traveler in Setswana, one of our languages. So as a travel and tourism business, it kind of worked both ways. We kept the legacy of Mandela in the organization, but we also kind of were able to bring in the fact that we're a travel business in one of our own vernaculars. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I've known you since we were corporate babies, effectively. And you have always been adamant that any project you do fundamentally must involve the local community, or you don't want the investors' money. Talk to us about that, please, and how it impacted how you then created this group and the projects.
I wanted to be a doctor, but I wasn't clever enough. So the next thing that I could do was go into business, but the only way of doing business in a manner that helps people was to find a way of expressing really one of my values, which is uplifting and improving people's lives. And then I had the joy or the privilege of working for organizations that allow me to give expression to that. I mean, the first organization was Kagiso, which was a black-owned investment firm, which was also based on the ethos of giving back to communities. And the second one was Tebe. And I think for me, working for those two organizations was an opportunity to do things that are, one, I think David puts it nicely, that it's got a profit motive, but the profit motive is not the be-all and end-all. And for me, the upliftment of communities was a big part. More than that, it was kind of one of those things that as a, and I'm going to call myself privileged in this phase because it's privileged to be in the position that I'm in, black person in South Africa. It's my responsibility to uplift other black people or other communities that are in destitute conditions. So that's really how I find expression in all of this.
Brilliant. And when you were looking at some of the projects in your portfolio, whether it was Shalati or it was the Kruger Untamed, correct? It was you went through some investors, which I'll rename nameless, but you were extremely uncomfortable in taking some on unless they met certain ethical and community impact imperatives. What were those imperatives?
I think it was important for us to be aligned in terms of values. Upliftment of community is a big part of our life. So if it's sacrificed in the interest of pure profit, I think for us there's a misalignment right there. Because I would want to do things that improve their lives, and my shareholders will then just want the profit. And I just always find that I couldn't handle that.
And it was interesting because you, at a visceral level, couldn't handle it either, and then you put the decision in place. I'm going to turn now to you, Habilo, in terms of SANParks, because equally, your stakeholders have 4 legs. Many of them have tails. And it's about making sure that the investment impact is shared by them as well. We're talking about models for private-public people and small creature partners. How do you make that model work? What has worked for SANParks to enable it to grow the way it has and maintain and actually elevate its asset value?
Thank you. So this is on. Okay. Denzel, thank you for those comments as well. You'll name the rest of us Anita after this. Good afternoon to everyone. Just a very brief introduction about South African national parks. We run 21 national parks across the country. The best known is just behind you, Table Mountain National Park, as well as Kruger National Park, and several others. We have 70 public-private partnerships operating in these parks in the form of lodges, restaurants, activities, which activities, for example, the cable car that you see moving up and down Table Mountain National Park is also a triple P. And our model as a state-owned entity is, well, let me start by saying our mandate is conservation of biodiversity as well as cultural heritage, but mostly biodiversity. That's the primary mandate. And we have successfully run an organization where 80% of our revenue is generated by our ecotourism activities. So we don't necessarily depend on the fiscus to fulfill our mandate for conservation. So we take the tourism revenues and invest them into fulfilling our mandate. So that's basically the business model. And where triple Ps come in, the private sector, we started a commercialization strategy 25 years plus ago that we have learned a lot from, we've improved over the years, and perhaps later on I'll talk more about what it is we're going to do in the future. And over the years, that commercialization strategy created these triple Ps that I've referred to earlier. Over the years, these triple Ps have grown to contribute about 10% to our revenue, which roughly works out to about 2 billion in the past 2 decades. So that is the value that not only ecotourism has had in terms of fulfilling the conservation mandate, but as well the partnership between the public and private sector has had, directly impacting on our ability to meet our mandate.
Brilliant. And it's amazing, as to your point, the Sandparks is a very large organization. It's a jewel. And the recognition and the appreciation for it is immense. And congratulations on your recent launch of your new vision as well, which very much calls out the importance of community must be a part of this as a participant and as a carrier of the pride of the parks that we have. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Wilfred, from your perspective, I'd love to hear how you bring the communities into Cape Nature as your stakeholders and partners.
Thanks, Anita. Good afternoon, everybody. As I was coming here this morning, my first meeting was down the road at our attorney's Cliff Decker. So we also have a legacy with previous President Mandela. In the early 2000s, he became aware that he's got a holiday home at the Hoop Nature Reserve. It was an old house where President P.V. Botha and de Klerk visited for holiday purposes. It's in a World Heritage Site. And at the time, he said, nope, I'm never coming there. And let's open the house for the people of South Africa. We embarked on a private partnership with Natural Selections, and I see Tim is in here. It wasn't an easy road at the beginning, but it is a successful road. We currently have 8 triple Ps operating within a presidential poverty node. Our contribution to the local economy is roughly close to R1 billion. We employ 150 people permanently from that local community. And one of the reasons I came here early this morning is our community beneficiation model. It's all good and well that we contribute to the local economy, we employ people out of the Overberg district, but we've now signed a trust with the local employees. We are going to use government money by way of an EPWP program in community wages, where we now signing over 20% of the work collections into the hands of a Zavali trust that we've created, and that is the share that the community, by virtue of the employees, will hold into that entity. So they both have an incentive to work hard within that entity. They're not only going to get a wages, but there's direct financial benefit at the end of the day. It has been a long road with triple Ps at Cape Nature. I mean, I think we've learned the lessons the hard way. COVID taught us different lessons. We now successfully generating revenue at a percentage of what the private sector is making, aside from our annual concession agreements and the fees that we generate. And all of that money goes back into conservation. Yeah.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very much. We have 4 superb examples of models that work. Now, I must say, I'm at the risk of breaching protocol at the moment, but I'm looking at an empty chair. And there's someone here in the room that I know is masterful at letting the private sector have the space and the oxygen they need to go and make an impact. Would anyone else in the room want Honourable Minister de Lille to take the extra chair on the stage? Please join us. Thank you. Because I think what's really important, and why specifically, Honourable Minister, I was very keen on, we can actually pass that down, on your joining us, is that it's something that David tapped in on. Cape Town, South Africa, Kruger, the Winelands, etc., absolutely, we have enormous, enormous pull for international visitors. A huge amount comes in. They're impacted by seasonality, we know that. They're impacted by mobility, we know that. But very importantly, it's the psychological welcome that matters. And we remember the old days of the V&A, before David was there, when the V&A was born, and it was a spectacular new tourism attraction, but it was felt to be a lily white attraction for international visitors. And it's not just about saying you are welcome, it's making people feel welcome. And that's why, to me, the V&A has always been a stage for South Africa to be celebrated by whomever. And that's why I loved your stats about almost a 50-50 in terms of appreciation. Honourable Minister, and I'd like to get everyone's point of view, that you can't create a partnership unless someone feels valued. What have we learned about making sure that as much as we welcome the world to what the locals must consider part of their home? What can you share from your perspective on that?
Thank you very much. Certainly, you don't want the locals just to tell their stories. It's important. But we also have to be proud of our history, of our heritage. Because one day I got onto the red bus with a golf cap on and a little boy with me, trying to disguise myself. And we were on this bus, and as we were driving through Cape Town and up Table Mountain, I was listening to the history. And I thought to myself, who wrote this history? And afterwards, I did make contact and say, there's some missing pieces in the history. It must be an inclusive history. In fact, it was around the time when people claimed that Cape Town is 350 years old. And there was a statue down here. We were Founders Day, 6th of April, 1652. And I said, no, we were not found, we were here. And that must be included in the history. But I think the way the waterfront have developed over the years is that it's not just a place for shopping. You can come down to the food court and you can sample any type of cuisine. You know, from the townships, from the Boerkaap here, Cook Sisters and curries and that. But also the place of enjoyment. So on Saturdays and Sundays and even during the week, there are local artists performing there. And so their followers will come to the waterfront to come and listen to them. And it's all free. And that for me is the good example of the waterfront in keeping, it's an outing for many Cape Townians to come to the waterfront. About a year ago, we also partnered with the waterfront. I wanted to bring out, we've got many shelters around Cape Town for abused women and children. And I wanted to bring them out to come and experience the waterfront, to the aquarium. And David organized all of that. And then I engaged with the hospitality sector. And from here, we took them for lunch at Bismillah in the Boerkaap. So it's that kind of interaction. Now, my personal approach is I ask, and you can either say yes or no. And that is what I always, when approaching the private sector, is to say, I need your help. I never come there, arrogant government, we know everything. And if you approach the private sector by saying, I need your help, that's when you get the response that bring that collaboration. So the waterfront is a great success story for all Cape Townians, except New Year's Eve. Don't come in by car, because you're never going to get out. And you will see Cape Townians from all over flocking to the waterfront. So the waterfront is one place where the private sector benefit is that all restaurants are full that night. The other benefit is that you can see the demography of Cape Town reflected. you will get people from Gugulethu, from Mitchell's Plain, from Kemps Bay, from Sea Point. And for me, David, that is the wonder of the waterfront. Thank you.
Madam, you mentioned something very important, because ultimately you're picking up the phone and calling David and saying, I want to bring these women.
And he never said no to me.
Because it means by implication, he wasn't thinking, but they're not going to spend any money, but they're not going to be doing this, they're not going to be doing that. I'd like to understand from each of our speakers, how do you sell that case? When it comes to the model of being able to bring investors in, how do you get them to believe that the KPI of, because it's the right thing to do, is bankable? How do you do that? From a Sandparks perspective, please.
I'm going to try and find the right way of saying this, but conserving natural assets is difficult globally. The funding of the act of conservation across the world is a perennial challenge. Then you also have to deal, let's talk about our context as South Africa, or most of Africa, with communities who then, to them, conservation without benefit sharing is a hard sell. And so we have no option to hold on to the social license for the business of conservation. We need to find measures of inclusivity. People protect what is important to them, whether we like it or not. Let's just speak about the Kruger National Park. There's plus minus about, Kruger National Park, just to give you a context, is 2 million hectares over 2 provinces. And surrounding that 2 million hectares is plus minus, depending on who's counting, 6 to 7 million people. These are communities that are afflicted with the socioeconomic challenges of South Africa as we know them: youth unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And these are communities to which we, as the protectors of this 2 million hectares, have to ensure we have a partnership that benefits them. Because otherwise, the question is, why should I then treat this as a sacred space? Why can't I cut this fence? Why can't I hunt these animals? To really put it very frankly. And so we need to constantly be looking at improving our models for community beneficiation. And when we put out, as I said earlier on, over the 25 years we have learned a lot in terms of our public partnerships, public-private partnerships, and we keep improving, and the stakes are getting higher and higher. And so when we put out invitations for people to bid for these opportunities for business within our organization, within the national parks, they need to understand that you cannot come in with a hard-nosed business objective which does not understand inclusivity.
Indeed.
And that inclusivity has to come in a number of initiatives. The model has to be quite innovative. Because in the past, what we have done in this country, generally when we talk about transformation, is we've had a tendency to window dress. So we need to see proper equity ownership, so equity participation in the business. We also need to see employment opportunities, and I'm not just talking at laborer level, senior management, and those people should be employed from the communities, from the neighboring communities, at least within a 100-kilometer radius. And we need to see the creation of partnerships with small to medium-sized businesses from these communities, either partnerships or enterprise and supply development programs. And what is also critical for me, and I'll go back to the employment element in enterprise and supply development, is we can't transform and break the cycle of poverty and low economic growth unless we transfer skills
Yes.
into communities. So when we talk about communities having shareholding, it is not about just dividend flow, because that is the danger. We can do a whole Mother Teresa, almost charity type of approach where all they receive is dividend flows, which is good, everybody loves money. But at the end of the day, if they, as recipients, are not learning new skills that they can then use to replicate in other businesses, then we are really creating a crisis. So essentially, Anita, what I've just tried to do is encapsulate our ethos towards transformation and triple Ps within SANParks.
You raise an interesting point that goes to our last leaders dialogue as well, in terms of it need not be the front line of tourism. It could be the supply chains, the value chains that link to it that go through. Because I think, and this is where it goes back to what the Honourable Minister was saying, that participation must feel dignified and proud and genuine and opening up opportunity, which means by implication, people within that radius, Kruger is theirs. That's why they're protecting the rhinos. Those are their children as well. Otherwise, it is easier to cut the fence and provide the horns for someone who's going to pay for it. It's an interesting equation, that. So we're going to push this through a little bit. And Wilfred, 60 seconds from your perspective.
I want to add to that, and that's why we use the term relevance, so that our communities and businesses in those communities can understand why we do, I call it PPMs, and we've replaced the last P with the M, calling it a marriage. Because our triple P, our agreements are 45 years in total for the 8 agreements. And initially, when we engaged on this process, everybody thought there's something for us in the pie, and we can get a slice of it. But the expanded benefit for our local businesses and the communities is far-reaching in the way that the better or the more improved our product is on the reserve, the better they will do financially. And a simple example is that one of our partners decided to outsource the laundry services to a small laundry in Bredasdorp. And the laundry couldn't cope because of the volume of work. William Stevens then said to the owner, let's go into a partnership. We'll buy a laundry from you. We'll expand the business to the extent that they do all the hospitals, the 2 hostel schools in that community and the surrounding towns. So that kind of benefit, experience, and all of those that the private sector has goes to those local communities as well. And it's been a tremendous successful story for us to tell.
Interesting. And again, going back into how do you make that attraction work through those supply chains? I'm curious, Honourable Minister, if I were to say to you that, shame, David's not going to be staying with us as CEO next year. This is fictitious, just for clarity as he gives me a look. And you had to brief in the new CEO. What would you share with the new CEO of the V&A Waterfront about how to successfully work with government in a really good, solid PPP? What would your advice be?
Just before we answer you, we've got a very important person in this room that is representing rural tourism. But 2 years ago, started a website for all small towns and villages and townships, tourism to come together. His name is Ron McKenzie. And I would like you also to engage with him around rural tourism, because there's great opportunity. But first of all, a new CEO for the waterfront, I want to be part of the interview panel.
It's a good point, actually. We laugh, but it's a good point.
But I would like to see, or I would tell the panel that the kind of person that we need is to build on what we have achieved. and then design the future for the waterfront to continue with the same values, inclusivity, keeping communities together. But it's also important that there be a good relationship between the waterfront and local government. I don't know if Mayor Jordan Lewis is still here, because the benefits and the spin-offs from the waterfront is enjoyed by the economy of Cape Town. It's a major contributor. So I will not advise government to fight with the waterfront because they're such a big contributor to that. And it must be a person that really loves Cape Town. It took us about 5 years to, in terms of marketing Cape Town around the world, to say to the rest of the world, you all come to Johannesburg to do business and then you leave, or you go for a safari. Come down to Cape Town. And it was Tim Harris and myself that traveled around the world to sell Cape Town very aggressively. So Cape Town is also a classic example of the impact of tourism with the economic growth here. It's because of tourism. Tourism makes a big contribution to the growth of the city of Cape Town and indeed the whole province. So David, I don't hope that you leave soon, but if the day comes, I want to be on the panel.
It was to that point, and thank you very much for that. And Rodney, we're going to have you participating, as you and I had a conversation earlier. David is leaving because he's actually taking over the CEO role of Motsamaya Tourism. So my question is, because some people have to go back to Hollywood. Hollywood is calling. It's just happening. What would your advice be to David, or what would your instruction be to David to take over the group and to do it in a way that remains absolutely intact with the principles behind it?
Forgot that I used to use the microphone. I actually wouldn't have anything to give to David for the work that he's done here, and to look at David's values and his effort to make the entire thing more inclusive. I think he would fit in nicely. The only thing that he must learn to have a meeting in a marula tree or a mopane tree. I think that's probably the only advice, is that the conversations that we have are not boardroom conversations. You cannot have IRR of 18% or ROE of 20%. The communities want to know, will my child get a job? Will I have a job? Does this project give us opportunities to grow? It's a really basic, elementary things, and we need to find a way of translating them back to the investment community. And I think that's been the big challenge for me, is to stop speaking English and speak community. And I think that is a very, very difficult language to speak. If you can speak that, David, you'll do fine.
I must say, I think you pretty much captured the soundbite of the panel with that. And it's an important point, because it is that engagement. And that's where, Honourable Minister, when we make the case for investment, I'm not sure if many remember when it was pre-COVID. It's amazing how it's a bookmark in our timelines. And Honourable Minister Balala I think I just lost my battery. My batteries have just dropped. Honourable Minister Balala, who was the Minister of Tourism of Kenya's wildlife and tourism, obviously, they had the massive ivory cull. Do you remember they had that massive ivory burn in Kenya? And he came out with a spectacular soundbite and saying, every elephant is worth 70 times more alive than dead. So burn the ivory. Get rid of it, because that's not where the wealth comes from. And it almost feels as if we need to make those equations, those cases, like when it was said many years ago that tourism is South Africa's new gold. People can get it. Even if they're not doing it, they can get it. They can see the value. And to be able to translate that, as you said, for every investment we make in this camp, your child will go to school that much longer. It's that we have to be able to be clear. What's in it for me at a local level, which is really important. So if we look at then the models of PPP and going forward with all of this and looking at, again, all creatures great and small, we have the last 12 minutes of the panel before everyone goes off for feeding time. And I want to get a sense of, and I'm going to start with you, Honourable Minister, if we look at the real critical areas of success, we have the language. PPP is a bit like sustainability, quite honestly. It's language that's lost its credibility in a lot of ways. You've always been very, very clear. It's not government's job to create the jobs. It's government's job to enable it. If you look at it from the point of view of your wish coming out of this summit, what is the one wish you would have on shifting understanding about how to make PPP really work? Unedited, unfiltered, no diplomatic shield.
Well, like I said this morning, from the 1st of June 2025, what came into effect is a big policy shift. Policy shift where Triple Ps is no longer taking 2 years just to put together. But we're also giving investors an opportunity to come with innovative funding models, how you want to spend your money. Build, operate, and transfer. We are busy packaging now. There are many government-owned resorts all over the country. It should have never been managed and operated by government because they've run them into the ground. So we want to put them all together in one project in partnership with the private sector. To say to the private sector, and that could be also big value for our communities to use these resorts, is that repair them, fix them, operate them. Government must get some dividend, but government mustn't manage and operate those facilities. So we're busy packaging all of those facilities into one project. And then I will come to the private sector and say, let's talk about how. And those resorts are owned by local government, by provincial government, by national government. But I will engage at that level to make this project a success. That's just one example of how we have shifted policy from government want to do everything to saying to the private sector, let's work together. Thank you.
Indeed. You've raised an important point there, and I actually want to now bring Rodney in, because you were speaking, come join us. Bring a chair, come join us. You were speaking earlier when we were talking at the break about young people and making sure that young people, because whether it's in urban centers, but especially in the rural communities, keeping those communities together is about keeping the communities at home. What can you share with us about what you wanted to share with us?
Well, thank you for bringing me up here. Just some quick background. I want to thank the Minister for bringing everyone together and the team for making it happen. The reason I want to thank you is that I believe that there are communities out there that are going to benefit from today. I really think you've brought together people who are change makers and creators. So I'm very excited about it. Something that happens when you invest in a country, you invest in people. And South Africa's people are more beautiful than its scenery. And it might sound fluffy, but it's true. We have wonderful people. It's often lost in the bad news. There's always going to be bad news, but we have wonderful people. And leading into that, I was at Colin Bell's new Gwegwe Beach Lodge in the Eastern Cape recently. And afterwards, during the stay, I interviewed some of the staff that was there. And we both know Asanda, aka Aquaman. I was chatting to him and I said, "What does Gwegwe mean to you?" And he said, "It's given me the ability to dream." And I almost fell off my chair because I just wouldn't have thought about that. And some of the other people that I spoke to, in getting to your question, said to me that they used to have to commute hundreds of kilometers and hardly ever go home. And now they work near there, and they're dreaming of opening their homestays, and the community is benefiting.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. On top of that, and sorry, thank you. On top of that, and counting down time-wise, like I did in the last session, I want us to focus on next year. We have a year to make an impact. We have a year to come back together. What would all of your wishes be in terms of what we see as a focus next year to make sure that this G20 legacy project, this summit, continues to be a return on not only investment financially, but return on image, return on innovation, return on inspiration, return on participation? How do we do that? What would you want to see?
I think we should just focus on getting 10 million international visitors into South Africa and more than 50 million traveling domestically, and do everything that it takes to do that. We need new products, we need better infrastructure, but more than that, we need to upgrade our people.
And what would be priority number one?
I think right now it's actually scary that all of them are important, because the infrastructure, you can't move unless the infrastructure is right. You can't get the infrastructure right unless the people are right. So it's a bit like one of those things, you've got to push it both ways.
And I think it goes back to we need to learn the language of community. David.
Yeah, look, I think the format and the conversations are the right conversations. I think what I would add is I think don't underestimate in public-private partnerships the need to give leaders the freedom and flexibility to lead and be well supported by their board. And I think as an industry, we need more sort of experienced, trained leaders to create these environments, and boards that are supportive of that. I think it seems to me it's one of the success comes when you allow leaders to lead. And I'm very privileged. I enjoy my job every day because I have that privilege. And you can get some successes. But if we're financially constrained, if we're over-bureaucratized, if we're over-governed, it's frustrating, So I think it would be about picking up leadership within the industry and structuring the industry, PPPs, to deliver all the wonderful things that can be done.
And it goes to what you were saying about the boundaries of influence.
Yep.
So you don't usually give me the chance to speak. It goes to the boundaries of influence. And this is where, Madam, it was exactly what you've always said. This is what government needs to do. This is what private sector needs to do. But to actually map it, to actually make it clear, this is what my expectations are, this is what my expectations are of you, just makes it easier to deliver, ultimately, because there's an understanding of common objectives, but shared responsibility in different areas. From your perspective, Wilfred.
Minister alluded to it very early this morning, is for government to continue to improve on creating the efficiencies around that enabling environment. We've got to make it easy for the private sector to work with government, to invest in the properties that we have. Ultimately, government is not in the business of running and operating and managing tourism facilities. Yes, we do have an access mandate for our local communities, and sometimes the private sector is unaffordable, but we've got to strike that balance between the product that we are able to manage ourselves versus creating that enabling environment for the private sector. I think it's vitally important. We don't have the money. I think we're better off spending our money on the social investments that we must make in the country, health, education, etc.
Brilliant. And Hapilo, from your perspective.
Anita, remind me the question again. I mean, really what's happening is this is such a fascinating topic for some of us, and we're really very engaged. So with every point that's being made, one is storing that. So you're saying the legacy within the next year. Okay. Can I tell a little story?
Absolutely.
Okay, sure. Well, firstly, we want to see an expansion of the network of investors within our national parks. You know, we need to increase that. We have, give or take, about, I said we've got 70 concessions in our national parks. We have about another 100 in the pipeline. And people need to know this, investors need to know this. And while we're speaking community, how do we then ensure that communities benefit and participate in this pipeline? And one of the problems or one of the hurdles that we find is that of access to finance. And where we sit, we're saying to the private sector, how can you come on board to support these particularly small and medium-sized entrepreneurs in the communities to fully take advantage of these opportunities? Remember, from our side, we provide the opportunities, and our mandate can only get to a certain point, but we need to then create these very healthy partnerships to ensure that things come to fruition.
Yes.
Access to finance, access to markets, access to skills.
Brilliant. Thank you
you.
very much. Now, you had a very interesting suggestion for next year. Please, will you share?
Well, just, I think before that, if AI continues, maybe we can just replicate this panel as one of the wishes. But in terms of a practical one, I think it would be fascinating if next year we could have community champions and people that are actually part of these upliftment programs that have done so well, the Sanders of the world, that are here. So that might be part of, you asked a question, how do we get investors to feel that reality of what they're doing and make that a KPI, meet the real people? That would be wonderful, and maybe a 2-day event.
But it's an interesting point because it's not talking about them who will benefit. Bring them here. Let them tell the stories of how their lives have changed. And I loved your principle about the enablement to dream. Hope is like a battery pack. And when it's charged up, the impact that can have is huge. And that becomes contagious in the best of ways. Brilliant. So, Madam, to you, what are you wanting to see from your private sector partners next year to really make this work going forward? How are you wanting them to support you?
I think, sometimes the private sector can be very modest in what they are actually doing. I would just wish that we can know more, like, let's take training. That you advertise more what kind of training you are doing, so that we don't, as government, duplicate or wanting to do the same. Just yesterday, just with 5 of our sponsors, I had a meeting and discover the kind of training that they are doing already. The partnerships with the groups like Harambee. We also work as government with Harambee. And then if we know what training you offer in the private sector, so please advertise a bit more so that we can latch onto that and instead of reinventing the wheel. Also, the skills levy that is spent by the SETAs, which in our country, I think that the private sector must play a more prominent role. It's your levy that you are paying, and you must together design the skills needed, the demand-led skills. Because a lot of the young people that go to the SETAs for training, they sit without a job. And I would like to see more from the private sector in terms of earn and learn. And what I'm prepared to do from tourism side, in the service sector, starting from the 1st of April, is to say to the private sector, I will pay the stipend for that person to come and learn in your facility for a year, so that they learn and they earn at the same time. And I really want to upscale that in the next 3 financial years. What we've done with Sandparks, we built a dinosaur interpretation center inside Sandparks. I went to go and hand it over to them for operation. And I said, what is your fee structure? Well, how much are you going to charge the communities to come in here? And I said to the CEO, no, I don't like your fee structure. For the first 6 months, make it free so that we drive up the demand. And the CEO agreed, and within a month or 2, with more than 18,000 visitors there.
Goodness.
And that is the kind of partnership that I would like to engage with the private sector. And please feel free, I'll give you my cell number. Please feel free to contact me directly so that we can, I don't want you to go from pillar to post, because that's what's normally happening in government. You get sent here, you get sent there. I'll give you my cell number, 084 777 2065, and contact me directly, and I will then direct you where to go in government. I think government has got a reputation, Anita, that we don't get things done. We don't return phone calls, we don't respond to emails, and it's really, with the government of national unity that we have now, we want to improve implementation and accessibility. I want to be accessible to this sector all the time. There's one gentleman sitting at the back there, Michael Tolman. I was in my office for a week, and he complained to me about something. I said, where are you? I'm speaking from London. I said, when are you back from London? And I think it was a week or so later. And I said, can you do this? And we agreed. So there are all the people in this room, I know you are committed to making tourism become a real accelerator for economic growth. But the buck stops here. The buck stops here. We talked about accountability and responsibility. So I'll give you my cell number. If there's anything from the government side that you want fixed, I will help you. Thank you very much.
And you make a really interesting point, and thank you for sharing your number. I'm sure your network is wondering, why is there a surge suddenly in this number?
Say my number on the radio sometimes.
Because I think what's important is what you've said, which is really interesting. The opportunities for learning, they exist. How can government help scale it up? So that's there's no point in creating more institutions. How do we scale up those institutions through that partnership? It's a brilliant idea. On that note, I ask you all, please, to give a very warm hand to our 2 very special guests added on to the panel, and to our panel for taking us through this conversation and keeping it very real. So thank you very much for joining us. We're going to have one more little video that's going to be shown. Excellent. You have terrible handwriting. So, stunning. So we are going to show one more video in terms of the projects themselves, and then we're going to ask you all to head downstairs for lunch on the 5th floor. We'll see you back here at 2 o'clock. Remember, the videos are showing our spotlights. The owners of the projects themselves, they're all here. Conversations need to be had, and we go from there. So please have the conversations, as we're not going to have those engagements this afternoon. Enjoy the video, enjoy your lunch, and to our lovely panel, thank you for enriching the stage. Thank you so very much.